Okay, we are at chapter 2, Breaking the Pact. I must be willing to give up what I am in order to become what I will be. Albert Einstein. Joshua's newly found sense of freedom is cut short when, after he leaves, an owl attacks and kills some of the chickens in the coop. He realizes in horror that in leaving them behind, he might be responsible for the death of part of his flock. He spends the next few days in absolute misery. Before we ask ourselves for the first time whether or not there could be more to us than what we seem to know, we had been living according to a pact we had made. Unbeknownst to us, we had made a pact with our ego self, the small self, the self that wants to stay in oblivion until the end of time. We swore in blood never to abandon that little self of ours. We made a pact that gave us a somewhat comfortable life in moderate pain, not enough to be happy, but not painful enough for us to want to change it. That pain lay just below the surface. Once we ask the question whether or not that little self we know is all there is to us, we threaten the pact that protected us from ever waking up to our full potential. There is a part of us that feels betrayed by that. Whenever that part of us feels betrayed, we experience pain. Joshua abandoning his flock in the beginning of the story is a symbol for our thoughts of abandoning our small self, that quote-unquote friend of ours, the bad friend that means us ill and gets us in trouble, but we still stick with him. Once we question our littleness once, it is as if we swallow the red pill, like Neo in the Matrix. From here on out, we can never fully go back to our old self. Joshua can't go back to his flock. He feels guilty over abandoning them. The fence is too high for him to fly back in, and so he has no other choice but to begin his journey. Those next couple of days, our rooster friend is filled with regret. He's cold, wet, and lonely and misses his flock. Like a battered woman missing her abusing husband, we too miss that part of us that kept us prisoner all our lives. We want to go back to it, want to forget we ever asked the question, want to feel the warmth of our coop once more, even though we know that this part of our lives is probably over. And we haven't even started on the journey yet. At this point, we have only taken a few steps in the right direction, and we just left the cozy and warm blanket we were under. Once we begin our journey toward our true self, the love that was the motivation for our journey begins to fade. The beam of sunlight that pulled us toward it from outside the darkness of our small self begins to darken once more. When the clouds come and close the gap the sunlight had left open, we forget what made us go on this journey to begin with. The dream to escape our littleness fades in time and needs to be recalled often in order for us not to lose hope. It seems very hard at times to continue to recall to mind the purpose of our quest. We need to be reminded, and often, that what we are searching for is there for us to find. It might be hard, especially in the beginning, to remind ourselves of this. And if it were only us, we would most likely get lost on our journey home. But we are not alone. There are others like us on this very same journey. We might not recognize them at first, for they are most unlikely friends to have. Chapter 3. Unlikely Friendships. Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Just walk beside me and be my friend. Albert Camus. We all have friends. Those are what I would call likely friends. We know them because we went to school with them, they live in our town, our children play together, we work with them, etc. We all know the value a friend can have for us, especially when we go through a rough time. But for the purpose of this book and the context of Joshua's journey, let me talk a little bit about unlikely friends. A wolf and a rooster are unlikely friends. In The Three Feathers, their meeting each other just happens. Neither of them had planned it. The wolf is curious. He senses something in Joshua. As he tells him, Gray, the wolf, senses a longing in him, a yearning for something, and because Gray identifies this yearning as also being within himself, he decides not to eat him, but to help him. Next, they meet Creek, a warhorse. Joshua can sense the same terror in the horse that he had first identified within himself during the episode with the other rooster in his pen who had been taken by the farmer and butchered right in front of Joshua's eyes. The horse would normally not even spend one thought on the rooster, and Joshua would have probably just tried to avoid being trampled by Krieg if they had been in the same vicinity. Gray and the warhorse would definitely not be friends. However, the three of them, throughout the story, built a friendship that goes beyond not only what they could have dreamed of, but beyond the boundaries of this world entirely. On our own spiritual journey, we are asked to open our minds and hearts to all the unlikely friendships we can and will encounter. Some might become long-term relationships, others might last but an instant. The duration does not matter. Whenever we recognize in the other the very same longing and yearning we have, the longing to escape from the confines of our small self to the magnificent beauty and quiet power of our real self, we are meeting an unlikely friend. It might be someone we meet at the cash register in a supermarket or in the subway next to us. Maybe it is our UPS delivery person or the person we serve dinner to in a restaurant. Those encounters we have, as brief as they might be, are like stars in a darkened sky. They can be light posts on our journey, guiding us from one to the next and all the way to our final destination, our true self. This brings me to another thought, closely related to this one. Each of the three companions, on the outset of their journey, is very much involved in his own goals. Joshua wants to find the three feathers and escape the guilt over abandoning his flock. Gray wants to escape the loss of his companion and, hope against hope, find it again. Krieg wants to escape the horrors of war and imprisonment and desires peace most of all. All three not only are dealing with their issues by themselves, but are mostly concerned with themselves. Gray's journey to recovery begins when he realizes that Joshua probably needs his help. Joshua's road to his own healing begins when he realizes that Krieg needs both their help badly. Krieg's journey to peace begins when he comes back to save Gray and Joshua from being killed by the men who held him prisoner. Krieg later on sees that the Pegasus can't make it out of her state of being petrified in stone by herself and decides to help her. The Pegasus begins the remainder of her journey by deciding to help Krieg find his friends and go beyond his limitations. For all of them, only after they forget their own issues and concentrate on helping the other can they conquer their fears and the world they are about to enter and eventually reach their destination. The very same principle holds for our own journey as well. As long as our lives are about ourselves, we cannot find peace. The more we make the well-being of others our goal, the further we can come on our journey. This does not mean, however, that we become a doormat. Later on in Joshua's story, we learn of the power of the lioness, whose presence permeates their world. That power, the power of our true self, symbolized in the story by the presence of the lioness, is the true strength we can inherit. In this presence, our weakness, the weakness of our little self, will just vanish, and we will learn how to become truly helpful to others. We begin our journey by recognizing that the other's journey is our own. The other's pain is our own pain, and that if we want to reach our own goal, we need but to help others reach theirs. Like Joshua and his friends, we cannot finish our journey by ourselves. We must leave the enclosure, the coop, of our isolated state and reach across the gap to our brothers and sisters on the other side. Only if they have a place in our hearts can we find what we are looking for. And because we all are looking for the same thing, we can indeed help each other reach the goal we all so long for. We can learn from one another, and because we are connected to each other, we don't all have to go through every possible experience. Through joining with someone else, we might be able to save a large chunk of time that we would have spent repeating the same miserable relationships or conflicts over and over. Joshua's journey, if he would have gone by himself, would have taken him years, decades even, if he would have made it at all. One additional thought flows naturally into this section. It is the notion that we might not be able to walk this journey without a teacher. For Joshua, that first teacher is Gray. He not only becomes his best friend, but he is also his guide and his teacher. He helps Joshua avoid getting lost in the slowly building sense of hopelessness he experiences. A lot of times throughout the story, Gray stands guard over Joshua's thoughts, telling him when he went far off course and into the darkness. In our own journey, it is most likely that we will need a teacher at some point. Toward the beginning of the journey, this teacher might be an external one, a person in our lives who is wiser than us and whom we trust. It doesn't have to be a formal teacher at all, but it is important for us to have someone who stands outside of our own mind and does not share in the dark beliefs about ourselves. Our small self is based on an insane thought system. In order to leave it, we need someone who stands on the outside of it, on the sane side, calling us like the beam of a lighthouse reaching a ship in a storm. Eventually, this teacher should and will become more and more internalized. The deeper we go into the subterranean levels of our unconscious mind, the darker it gets, and the more we need a presence within our mind that will light up the darkness. Otherwise, we will eventually just stop altogether and, still stuck in the depth of our guilt, shame, and terror, we will have a hard time finding our way out. There's one moment toward the beginning of Joshua's story when he decides to just trust that the scary-looking large wolf sitting across from him will not eat him and will in fact help him on his journey. Joshua decides at that moment to just go with it. He puts his life into the hands of a stranger. At some point on our journey, we will need to do the same thing. As it happens with Joshua, that initial thought of trust will later on in the story be overpowered by fear, and he will lose his companion for a while. See Mirrors, page 63. But the first step is done for us when we decide to put our journey into someone else's hands.